Have you ever thought about music as a basic doorway? Today I'm in Nashville at Hideout Studios, and I'm sitting down with Philippa Hanna. She's an artist, singer, songwriter, worship leader from the UK. And I think you're going to love hearing her story. I think we all have a lot we can learn from it. So stay tuned. Let's go. Philippa, welcome to the Worship Online podcast.
Good to be here.
Thank you for joining. We've had a lot of conversations in the last few minutes leading up to this about music from the UK. You already said good to be here. So if anybody doesn't know by your accent, you are British.
I am indeed British. I am from the north of England, somewhere called Yorkshire.
Okay. This is because of just your presence and your accent. I think this is going to be the most listened to episode probably already.
Yeah, amazing.
It's amazing.
Stay tuned in.
Yeah.
Lock in, guys.
Lock in.
You're going to get lots of this accent for the next 20, 30 minutes.
I love it. Well, I do have a burning question about this. Okay. And if this is offensive, I'm sorry, but everybody but Ed Sheeran, okay?
Right.
They talk with this amazing accent, but then when they sing, it sounds just like plain old boring English American.
You think so?
Yeah. Wow. I don't hear the accent.
I guess it's like a singing accent. Yeah.
Oh.
We sort of, without realizing it, we just moderate our Englishness a little bit so that it makes sense.
I really feel like it should probably go the other way, where Americans should probably moderate towards the British accent.
Yeah, you're probably right, actually. But I don't know. Some of them have a Cockney accent, don't they?
Yeah.
Bit of a Cockney accent, but
it's true.
I don't think you'd want me to be worshipping in Yorkshire. I don't know if it'd work that well.
I don't. Would you write that on the lyrics on the Pro Presenter, or I don't know what that would look like.
I don't know either. Although where I'm from, we use actually the, thou, people in Barnsley still use that kind of archaic English.
I love it.
Maybe we're hymnal up there.
I love it. I love it. Well, I would love for you to share some of your story, some of your background, maybe with people that aren't familiar with you. Can you talk about how you got started with worship ministry?
Well, worship ministry. I didn't even know what worship ministry was until I was 21. So I'm not from a church background at all. Raised in music. My dad was born into a traveling show. So he's the youngest of 8 siblings, born in the south of Ireland in a fleet of caravans. They used to tour Ireland entertaining. So you might call them gypsies, but they wouldn't appreciate that. They were traveling musicians, traveling show people, which was quite common in that day, in that time. Instead of watching TV, people would go out and watch live entertainment. So that's what my dad was raised in. And he knew music more than he knew anything else. He didn't go to school. He went, occasionally he did a bit of time at school. But his life and his livelihood was always music and entertainment.
Wow. That's so fun.
And everybody from Dad's lineage has become professional musicians pretty much. So all my cousins, siblings on Dad's side are lifers with music. So that was my upbringing. Grew up watching Dad playing in social clubs in England.
Yeah.
So we have these things called social clubs or working men's clubs. And they would be where those who worked in industries like mining industry, steel industry, mills, they would have these clubs, these little social clubs, kind of like a bar, but it did have a bar which would sell cheap beer and ale and stuff like that. They'd have entertainment and they would play bingo. Do you guys know what bingo is?
Bingo, yeah.
Yeah. So that was, my dad used to do the club circuit, and as soon as I was old enough to sing, he dragged me along to sing songs with him in the clubs.
Yeah.
And I got saved just before my 21st birthday.
How that? I mean,
yeah. So
at one of the social clubs, or just
no, not at a social club.
Bingo, yeah.
At the Jesus version of a social club, the church.
Yeah.
Now, I'd been making friends with Christians for a little while.
Okay.
I was pursuing a career in music, so I was top lining instrumentals and guesting on people's music, things like that. And I was in a bit of a dark space because I was in an abusive relationship at the time, very low self-esteem, making lots of mistakes. I dropped out of school really young because I struggled with my education, just really struggled with school in general, probably quite neurodivergent now that we've got a bit more knowledge on that stuff.
Yeah, we're made for this world now.
ADHD vibes, I really struggled at school. So music was my ticket in life. It was the only thing I had planned to do. And so I left school auditioning, making music, writing songs. ended up in this relationship that was really damaging for me. And around that time, I met some Christians who were super kind to me, spoke into my life. They really tried to help me with my music, and I did some music with some of those guys. And then they invited me to this little church one night, and I got saved. The Holy Spirit was moving, and I just responded to the Spirit and invited Jesus into my life. And I guess from there, picked up guitar and just started to work it out. It was a bit like a journal for me, songwriting. So just figuring out salvation. Wow. And that's how I ended up in ministry.
Yeah. So, I mean, you really did. So you did come to faith through music, kind of, but not necessarily worship music that you would think of. It was like music was kind of a doorway for you to enter into this. But obviously worship is much deeper than social club music. What was your experience like in those early days of hearing songs about Jesus, songs about, God's faithfulness, and songs about the Holy Spirit, as opposed to what you were singing and listening to before?
Yeah, so it was literally the music that spoke to me in that moment. So the guy who was leading worship, he was about my dad's age. He was probably in his mid-60s. He was just leading worship with a guitar. He had an overhead projector with the lyrics on screen.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. This is like Christian karaoke. I can do this. And I stood there beside my friends. I was looking at the lyrics on screen. And as I was seeing these lyrics, it was really triggering me, because they were lyrics about casting your burdens on the Lord because Jesus cares for you, about anxiety, about feeling lost, and all of those things. And so I was a little triggered, and I was standing there just thinking about my life, thinking about how I'd gotten to the age of 20 and still felt completely lost and didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and struggling in that relationship. I just felt like I'd taken a wrong turn somewhere and ended up way off the beaten path.
Yeah.
And that was what led me to pray in that moment. And I just said, Lord, if this is true, if you're real, and if I can be a new creation, like my friends have been saying, then I could do with that. I could do with a do-over. I really need to be able to start again. And I reflect on this quite a lot now as well. I think the sound of people singing around me was anointed. It was holy and anointed. And I think had it not been for that atmosphere of worship, I don't think my walls could have come down enough for me to feel safe enough to pray for the first time.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. That's helpful for all worship leaders, because, we're thinking about a lot of things when we're leading worship, right? We're thinking about a lot of times now click tracks, right? And are the people playing the right parts, and are the slides working, and am I singing the right note, and who's coming in here? And it's easy to forget, no, there are people here that are coming here broken and lost, and they don't fully understand and know Jesus. And we're giving them an opportunity. We're singing truth while they're here, and they're going to hear these words, like you said, about anxiety, casting your cares and casting your burdens on Jesus. And it's like, for you, like, it's like, wow, that is what I need. And now Jesus met you in that moment. That's incredible. What do you think about, you said that it was anointed. What are worship leaders carrying that maybe other types of singers and musicians aren't? Why would you say that felt anointed?
Yeah, really interesting, because I wouldn't have even said that the worship leader in this instance nothing about it was particularly impressive musically. And, he's a really gifted unlocker of atmospheres.
Wow.
His name is Godfrey Birtle.
Okay.
And he's very spontaneous, very loose, very free. He's a little rock and roll, like he's got a rebellious streak. I didn't know that at the time because I had no reference point. I'd never seen a worship leader before, ever. But he was just fearless. And something in his fearlessness made me feel equal parts uncomfortable and intrigued. I was like, wow, because he was flowing on his own, song to song, back into songs, out of songs. He was making up songs in the Spirit. He was singing very quirky refrains in the Spirit. Things like, we need to flush out disease. We need to flush out fatigue, and getting everybody to pretend to flush a chain of a toilet. So I was like, this is hilarious, but why am I crying? Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
This is odd. It's quirky, but
it's so real.
It was real. Yeah. And I guess it was refreshing for me, having come from a show business background, to come into this music atmosphere that felt extremely vulnerable and unfiltered. And it was partly that. And then the people singing around me, I don't know, I've thought about it a lot since. What is the difference between a football crowd singing and a church crowd singing? All I can say is that we're hearing the body of Christ sing. It's the body of Christ.
Wow.
Is there a more powerful sound?
I got chills.
So I think that, and however small, however large the crowd, however talented, however untalented the crowd, it's a special sound. And it sounded different. I'd grown up listening to amazing musicians singing around guitars, but this sound was different. So part of my passion now and the season I'm in now as a worship leader, which we can get to through the conversation.
Yeah, of course.
Is I feel part of my calling is to get the body singing. And if they're not singing, I am not doing my job.
Wow.
And I want to hear the sound from the ground.
How do you feel like you mentioned that he was kind of fearless? What was the guy's name again? Godfrey
Birtle.
I'm going to ask you again after we're done because I'm going to go listen and look him up after this. But you said he was fearless. How has that carried over into you? Like maybe as you now as a songwriter, as a worship leader, how do you carry that type of fearlessness?
I've noticed that I've actually learned a little bit about this from a marketing perspective as well. It's a marketing strategy to flip the script. So everybody has this thing that happens in their body when they walk into church. We know what's coming. We know that usually it's going to be a welcome. It's going to be song 1, which will be up-tempo. Song 2 will be slightly slower, slightly more intense subject matter. By song 3, we ought to be entering in a little deeper, right, at that point. And then maybe we'll go straight into the Spirit and we'll dance around with Jesus for a while and we'll do some deep work with the Spirit. And so there's a curve, there's an arc. But one of the things I noticed in Godfrey's approach and in some of the best entertainers in the world in their approach and the best artists, whatever the field, is that they're prepared to break the script, to flip the script, to interrupt the expected. And I think
I love that.
It's actually something that you see people like Tony Robbins do as well when he's doing his his interventions, his psychological interventions.
Yeah.
He'll deliberately say something slightly shocking or unexpected, or if he's dealing with somebody that's particularly soft, he might come at them with some more aggression than he'd usually do. I think all these things can be quite useful in our worship. We don't want people to get too sleepy in worship and too comfortable.
Yeah, that's good.
So, and also, I think if we can be prepared to flip the script, that also, it challenges the fear of man in all of us. The fact that there's a camera on us, probably. The fact that it might be being streamed. I always feel like something happens in the Spirit when I say, okay, I don't care if this makes me look a bit of a fool online or if it's not quite, quote unquote, seeker friendly.
Yeah.
Because I think that wherever we can make room for the Lord to move, that's where we're going to encounter him the most, right?
Yeah. I love that you said that because that's so honest. And, you know, I've led worship for a long time, and there was a shift after online started happening where, you know, I probably wouldn't say this a lot, but if I'm honest, sometimes I'm like, oh, how did that come across online? Or, you know, maybe I know somebody that's out of town. I know someone's watching, or maybe my parents are watching, or my wife, or whatever, you know. And it's really hard to break out of, to stay so present in the moment and just be like, no, I'm in this moment. I'm going to respond to what it is, whether it's a little bit, maybe it's embarrassing, or people might be like, this is a little wacky, or, I mean, there's biblical, you know, precedent for this. David, right? He danced. I'm not saying anybody should be so wacky that they take their clothes off in church, but that's David. You know what I mean? And the Bible talks about that. What do you think would surprise people about the church in the UK? So one thing you mentioned about, you know, in the social clubs or in the music scene, separate from church, there was like this showmanship to it, kind of like this show business side of things. And then you went in church and it was like completely different. And I think maybe in America, we get those things so intertwined that they would look exactly the same no matter where you go. And the depth may or may not be there in either situation. So that's kind of like how I would look at the church in America in a lot of ways with our worship. In the UK, what do you think would surprise people? Well, give me a picture into the UK church as far as worship goes.
The UK church is quite diverse. So we do have some churches. The church I go to now is very well put together. We get a couple thousand on a Sunday.
Yep.
We have a countdown clock. We have click tracks. It's very familiar probably to that format.
Of course,
We also have, a lot of churches that have spires and steeples and stained glass and organs, and the person who's giving the address will be dressed in some kind of robes and and something that's a little bit more high church.
Yeah.
We have lots of little Methodist churches, lots of little Baptist churches. It's pretty diverse, and we also have we've had a huge sort of renaissance of African-inspired praise and worship because we've got so many Nigerian families that have immigrated into the UK. That's breathed new life into our worship.
Awesome. That's so cool.
I think you're going to see a lot of it, but I want to caveat what I just said because, yes, I walked in and it was a very unscripted, raw encounter with God that I had. And I think I'm so glad that the Lord orchestrated that for me because coming from a show business background, the last thing I needed to do was come into a performative environment. I needed to depart from the performative environment I'd grown up in. I needed a safe zone from that.
Yeah.
So even now that I'm involved in, I do ministry in bigger churches, I always want to carry that inside me, even if I have to work within the confines of that.
Right, you might still have lights and clicks and all the things, but internally,
inside, I'm like, all of this don't matter. And you guys can pretend it does for a few minutes and I'll go along with that so that you'll invite me. But when we get to the good stuff, we are gonna pretend that that's not there. And I actually think that's part of the reason God keeps inviting me places.
Because he's looking at your heart and your heart's in the right place. Yeah.
And because I think he wants to disrupt it as well.
Wow, that's so good. So, I see UK church on TV, maybe in social media, Reel, Instagram, whatever. How have you seen the church as a whole shift in the UK over the last, 20 years as you've been leading? We're entering into like a post-Christian world type situation. What's the difference now as opposed to back then?
Good question. It really varies from denomination to denomination. I'm grateful that I had no idea about denominations when I started out in ministry because I just used to go into any room and sing the songs I'd been writing and, try and be respectful of the traditions.
Yeah.
For instance, I'll go to some denominations where it's more acceptable to dress a little bit more formally. Others where it's like, if you're not in jeans and t-shirt, like, what are you doing? You would not be expected to wear heels in in a lot of churches. So I'm trying to be respectful of those things all the time. But I think in the last maybe 5 years, churches are fuller.
I love it.
Events are fuller.
So cool.
Gen Z is flocking to church. And, and I'm seeing it even in my own circle. My niece, Keris, who's 21, she was raised in a Christian home because my husband is from a Christian family. So she was raised in a Christian home. She was raised in ministry. She went to church all her life. But she only really committed her life fully to Jesus about 18 months ago. Since then, she has become like head of a Christian union at Royal Holloway University. And she's tripled the size of her church with students from the university.
Oh, my gosh.
And I think her case is one of many. It's the tip of the iceberg. It's happening.
That's so amazing. I think this connects so easily to the single, Till the Whole World Knows. Yeah. Can you let's talk about this. Okay, so tomorrow you got an album coming out called Magnificent.
Yeah.
Right? And it involves Israel, who's kind of like he's like a Mount Rushmore type worship leader here. I mean, actually globally, because he's involved in all this. He's amazing. Talk about how all of that came to be, how that came together, and talk about the song and the album a little bit.
Yeah. When I first got saved, somebody handed me this CD called A Deeper Level. It was one of Israel's albums. Yeah. And it was such a relief for me to put that in the stereo and listen to it because up until then, I'd only really heard like these 4-chord, very sort of traditional rock sounding worship songs.
Delirious, probably.
Which I liked, you know. Delirious, Tim Hughes, Matt Redman.
Yeah.
That was what I thought worship music was.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to really adjust my taste to to fit in with this crowd.
Yeah.
And then I heard A Deeper Level and I was like, man, that for the Quincy Jones and Motown and Stevie Wonder part of me, which is such a big part of my taste. I was obsessed with the music, and then just found his ministry really compelling as well. The way he prays between songs, the way he speaks between songs, the things he releases through the songs. Israel's songs are just really packed with good stuff. Like Israel's songs are just, he always has great ministry stitched into the songs.
100%.
So I loved it. And it would always be bucket list to hang out with him, never mind make an album with him.
Yeah.
And he came to the UK, and somehow my friends at Integrity managed to get me a writing session with him, which I prayed would go well, and thankfully did go well, because it ended up with us writing an entire record together.
That's incredible. What's that process been like?
It's been like a couple of visits from me to New York to write with him. He's been over to the UK a couple of times. There was a worship writing camp over here in Nashville.
Okay.
And we ended up just sort of sacking off the other rights to finish songs that we'd started together. And yeah, so it was fantastic. And then, so Israel has basically been the Quincy Jones of this operation. So he came into the studio with us, and we just all ended up worshiping together, and it ended up being more of a corporate worship thing than just a Philippa Hanna thing. So yeah, it's a joint project, really, Israel and I.
I love it. That's so exciting. I think worship gives us a glimpse into heaven, right? Like we look at heaven and, well, we don't look at heaven, but we read about heaven and we see that there's not going to be like till all of America hears, or all of the UK hears, or all of pick a country hears. It's to all the world, right? Because we're going to be collectively worshiping together. What have you learned and seen over time as you've now traveling the world about worship globally versus just in your sphere?
I feel like there's an urgency for the church to lift its voice nice and loud in these times. And, you know, these are fractious times where families are falling out over politics, times where, you know, it couldn't be more divisive. And, you know, I've had some fantastic conversations with some sage humans, people like Graham Kendrick, who was literally one of the first bricks in this wall, you know, this worship wall. Yeah. And asked him, you know, how do we do it? How do we sing into these times where it's like it's like this tiny spark would set the whole thing on fire, right? And he just said, we just need to keep preaching Christ. Just keep putting people's eyes on Christ. So, yeah, I'm seeing more than ever that we just need to praise God and sing and focus on that. How
do you think we can celebrate what God's doing, you know, in our church, in our, maybe even in our community, in our nation, and then also not lose this global viewpoint, you know? Because I think about somebody like Israel, right? Like he has a Spanish-speaking album, won a Latin Grammy. Yeah. He's doing stuff with you. One of my favorite albums of all time, live in South Africa at Cape Town. And you just see like all these glimpses of around the world. How do you think we can look at those two things?
One of the things I say right before I will sing a song like Till the Whole World Knows, which is it was the first single from this new record, and we played it live at Big Church Festival, and it went off. We've had so many videos of churches around the world singing the song, and it's kind of a revival anthem. One of the ways I'll set that up when I'm singing it live is that, you know, it's a slog, and it can be easy to begin to tire of doing good in our local context. We constantly going to be up against financial pressures and funding issues, and you know, we're going to have socio-economic issues to deal with in our communities. We've got all sorts going on, and so I'll say, like, you know, sometimes we wonder how many times are we going to have to put out all these chairs? How many times are we going to have to do a coffee rota? How many times are we going to have to turn up at 6 a.m. for a rehearsal for back-to-back services? The answer is till the whole world knows.
Wow.
It's a global response to a local question.
Wow, that's so good. That's so good. Well, I always end every episode with this question, okay? Go back to Philippa, you know, before you're 21, you're just getting into church, right? What would you tell yourself then that now you've learned over this life of worship leading?
Life of worship leading.
Or life of worship, or life of...
I would probably say, I'm not going to tell her anything because she needs to figure it out. Because that's what happened. You know, I asked God to show me what was going to happen and he didn't, but he taught me how to be faithful with the day to day. And I think just be faithful with each day. That's all you can do. And trust God with the pen. He's the best storyteller. So trust him with the narrative and keep showing up.
I love it, man. You have such an encouraging story. I think it's going to be helpful to so many worship leaders and worship team people. And I can't wait for them to hear your story. I think they're going to love it. And they're going to follow you and they're going to listen to the new album and they're going to cheer you on, just like I'm going to be cheering you on. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And thanks for the conversation.